we're back. djproject Breaks Bad. And again, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. If you haven't seen the show, you want to see the show, you're sensitive about spoilers, you shouldn't even be watching this anyway, so get that out of the way. Now, where we last left off, the fifth season, or the first half of the longer season, how you look at it, where we last left off, I mentioned that this was the apex for the characters. This is pretty much the highest that Walter could ever go, and it's really big. He had a chance to buy out his operations, and he got a very large sum of it, and he was also even able to pass on a successor as far as the manufacturer side of things, so that he doesn't have to be there to make stuff. So now he's at a point where he can be out of the business, he can now focus on his family, be involved in their lives. No more secrets, no more double lies, no more money laundering, all that stuff. He's done with it. But as soon as that happens, there was a family get-together, and Hank and Marie are joining with Walt, Skyler, and kids. And at a certain point, Hank has to go to the bathroom. Charming. So he does a little reading. And he sees the little magazine rack, pulls out a magazine, and he's not really interested in that. Then he pulls out a book. It's Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. And not just any Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. The same copy that Gail, Walt's lab assistant, when Gus gave him the meth lab to use for manufacturing for him, the Gale gave to Walt, which also has a signed little dedication to the other WW, which was something that Hank was aware of when Gale was murdered, and the Albuquerque Police Department, or APD, came out to him asking for his advice on a case, and got a facsimile of his lab notes. So, of course, the handwriting is there, and of course, there is a reference to WW. And at that time, he did put the two and two together. WW meant Walter White. Although anybody who knows Mystery Science Theater 3000 knows that there's plenty of other names that also have WW. In fact, I even did a little. There's a line that Hank gives, and he says, "Oh, WW, what do you mean? Woodrow Wilson, Willy Wonka." And then I started adding two more that I knew off the top of my head: Wim Wenders and Wesley Willis. So, and I'm sure, and I definitely know there was more because there is a skit at MST3K that covers lots of WWs. So, but of course, going back to Hank Hank asked Walter before, right? And he jokingly says, "You got me." But seeing it again, he finally puts the two and two together. This would be the beginning of Walt's downfall. And so now, from here on in, this is where the shit hits the fan. This is where loyalties are tested all around. Everybody's on tense mode. Everybody's pretty much at each other's throats. Shit's going down. And it's not pretty at all. In fact, I would say this is probably the ugliest in terms of just of characters and interactions. I mean, it's pretty much the low point. And in a way, this is what the show is what the show was kind of about. I think one of the big themes that ran throughout this entire show are three words: actions have consequences. Everything you do affects it ultimately affects everybody. And you see this pervade through the whole thing. And for instance, you have, towards the end of the second season, you have Jesse starting a relationship with Jane, who's the daughter of the landowner of the apartment that he's renting. They have a romantic relationship, but they also have a relationship built on heroin. I guess you could call it the days of smack and roses, maybe. But then Jane overdosed. It put her father into a depression. So that's one consequence. But because he works as an air traffic controller, the first day he goes back to work after spending some time grieving, he makes a fatal error that sends two jet planes on a collision, a mid-air collision, above the city of Albuquerque, where debris starts flying everywhere. Wayfarer 515. That's just one of many such little things, and this is where it really comes. And in fact, all of it kind of a fair chunk of it comes back to Walter directly. Walter had to deal with some of the consequences of actions right then and there. He had to deal with the short-term effects of it. But the long-term effects take a little while. And boy, karma is a bitch. And so this is where everything comes to a head. This is where Hank, of course, now that Hank has figured this out, he's completely disowned him, completely rejected him. And of course, this gets to Marie. She definitely rejects him. Is pissed off at her sister for knowing anything about this. Now, Walt Jr. starts to know about this. Holly's sort of a pawn, ends up being a pawn in all of this, when unbeknownst to her, she's still a little one. And it's not very, very good for him. And then it finally all comes together. On the one hand, the ending is kind of glorious, but on the other, it's one of those, well, you kind of deserved it. And interestingly, it kind of, actually in thinking about this, and I just thought about this just now, one of the things, I guess another pervading thing that I've been talking about, is that I've been constantly getting a Godfather vibe to this. And it's unavoidable. I think that a lot of things, especially if you're dealing with crime, is going to owe something, especially made since the 1970s, is going to owe something to The Godfather. In fact, a television show that you could say is a direct descendant of The Godfather would be The Sopranos. And Breaking Bad, I would consider a kind of first or second cousin of that show, because obviously Walter White does not claim any Italian ancestry. This is not a perpetuating of Sicilian-based vendettas, unlike the Godfather saga. But nonetheless, it deals with some of the same things, including especially actions having consequences, and then also how far does a head of household, a provider of a family, do for his family? And so, and then of course, can you do a wrong mean? Can you exercise a wrong means for what you perceive to be a right end, and not be corrupted? And it turns out, no, that's not how that works. Again, actions have consequences. But I will say that the thing that does, I don't want to say it puts me off in the show, but something that I found kind of interesting as I was watching the final season, I just finished this today, is that there's not really an indicator of redemption. Going back to the Godfather saga, and yes, this goes into part 3. I know everybody in the world hates part 3, but you know what? I don't have even Sofia Coppola, I genuinely don't have a problem with it, because that film makes sense for Michael Corleone's character. It is the ramifications of all of his actions in the first two parts. Plus, also, Francis Ford Coppola has said that Part 3 is more of an epilogue anyway, so I don't really consider this to be a grand film. It's just a film to help tie everything together. But in Part 3, you get, and maybe this is because Michael did a confession to the cardinal who would eventually supposedly become John Paul I, which of course is a big fictional stretch. But and the fact that he went through that, and of course, anything about confessions, that's kind of the whole. I don't want to say point, but this is one of the things that helps define a Christian is a chance. It's the chance to, after doing wrong, being made right, but being made right through the right way. And maybe this is why. So going back to the whole idea that there's no redemption in Breaking Bad, and I think a lot of it is because nobody believes in it. Nobody believes that you can actually be redeemed. That if you do something really, really wrong, you rub somebody the wrong way, they will hate you for the rest of their lives. They're not afraid to cut any ties. And this includes family. All the things that Walter did for the sake of the family has now disowned him. Forget Hank and Marie, and especially especially with what happens to Hank towards the end, they really disown him. So it's all that's gone, and it's and maybe that's the other thing. It showcases the fragility of trust and how when you lose that trust, it's broken. It also shows the dangers of loyalty, because one of the things that trips a lot of the characters, including Walter, is that sense of loyalty. His loyalty to Jesse has caused him trouble. His loyalty to his family, to Skylar, his children, and even Hank, who works for the DEA and is trying to get this Heisenberg, it costs him. And it's not to say that you can't be loyal. It's just, I want to say it's one of those things where you have to be careful about with whom you're sharing your loyalty. But I don't know, and maybe I'm on the fence with this because this is a trait that I think that I have, and I know that has been a trait that has cost me a great deal, and has and I've kind of, I don't want to say I've been burned by it, but I know that it's been what I thought would be helpful to me would end up not working out for me by exercising it. So yeah, it's again, it's very ugly, and so I like to think that the lack of redemption is because people don't really believe in it. And I also think it's because you're trying to redeem yourself in not the best way. That's how I would say this. Other people would argue differently. That the fact that there's no redemption at all shows that this is how the world really works, and that it all depends on how you believe. Even if you believe redemption is even possible, let alone attainable, I believe that it is attainable, but what's impossible for man is possible for God, and I think because of that, it's sort of, and actually, I think that's kind of the one thing you can kind of point out is that the fact that there's a lack of religion. Now, you could say, I don't know, maybe not having religion in there is I don't know. I guess what I was getting at is that you could make it'll be a kind of a weak argument, I would admit, but that because of characters' lack of religion, religion is what destroys them, but I'm not going to go that far. But at the same time, I can't help but think that if they understood, and actually this really comes through at the end, you kind of know what everybody values. And what you find out in Walter by the end of all of this is there is something else that drove him. In fact, this is probably something that drove him further than just mere provisions for his family. He did it because he enjoyed it. He did it because it was a chance to be big. This was a man who started off as a high school chemistry teacher, who also works part-time in a car wash, who was once one of the founders of a great tech company that is now earning millions. And he started this with his friends and colleagues in university days. I forget exactly what it was. That would make some great contributions, including results that would lead to the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, which he was indirectly cited. Doesn't have the medallion or anything. But, so he's kind of a, sort of a, I don't want to say a schlub, but just an ordinary Joe living in Albuquerque. Oh, wow. But now he finds out the day after his 50th birthday that he has terminal lung cancer. And it's like, what the fuck has my life been up to? It's the classic midlife crisis. It's the, what's my legacy? And then he finds himself an opportunity to really pull something big, to do something kind of grand, which is to supply the market of meth heads, to satisfy the demand of meth heads. Pulls a former high school student of his along for it, and he sort of feels his way into it. A little bit, definitely some fumbling and stumbling, but he goes through that, and then he makes his presence known. He gets a lot of attention, and so then he has to go bigger. He finally gets himself into a position where he's working for another kingpin. He's well compensated, but there are also some strings attached. And also there's no guarantees that he's going to continue to do what he's going to do. And so for the assurance of his own survival, he finds his way to obtain that security, which then presents another opportunity where he can even go bigger. And not just the American Southwest. He goes into Europe. And at the moment, his great height, it then starts to fall apart. And he ends up losing everything. So that's going back to the whole religion thing. It all goes back to the rhetorical question, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? And this is why I think Breaking Bad is one of the greatest television shows, certainly to come out in recent years, but I would say probably to come out in a long time. I haven't seen all the other shows that what makes a show great, but I think I've seen enough television shows, certainly plenty of kind of mediocre, crummy ones, and even a few really good ones to kind of know what makes a great show. I think in the end what makes a great show is when it's not just the writing, it's not just the performances, it's not just the look, it's not just the relatability or even likability of the characters, it's not just the situations, it's not just the questions it raises. In fact, it's all of those things. It's all of those factors working together in a beautiful, harmonious way, where you can look at each different facet and you can see how it all fits together and how together it creates this great whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And I know that a lot of attention has been placed on certain different parts, but really, it's not just them, it's all of it that works together. But it also works together not just for its own sake, or that it's just mere entertainment, but it can kind of get under your skin. It can leave you thinking about things. It's not just the emotional connection. It's not just the it's not just the hook where the show just sort of brings you in and you like what it does to you. You like how you're being manipulated. I've said this before, that in watching stuff, you're manipulated by everything you watch. The question is always, how do you want to be manipulated? So it goes beyond just, it satisfies your own demands or your own expectations about what you want to watch, but that it can do a bit more for you. And I've also said this before, what makes great art is how it serves as a means of transcendence. It's a mirror held up to nature. It's a chance to reflect back on what we as human beings can do to ourselves and to each other. And then it leaves you with the question, do you want to keep doing this shit, or do you want to do something else? And hopefully do something else that will lead to better things. And Breaking Bad, and I'm not going to claim that I don't know, I'm sure there's other shows that do some of the same things, but I'd be really, really hard pressed to find another show quite like Breaking Bad that will do it in that way. So, yeah. Like I said, I think in a couple weeks I want to do a kind of a wrap-up episode, a chance to maybe tie up some loose ends and fill in some gaps. I would like to get more into the background of the show, and I don't know if I have time to listen to all the commentaries ever given, but I definitely want to try to get more into sort of the underpinnings of the show and to kind of confirm some of my suspicions, because I was watching this assuming that this was going to be a sort of a tightly rolled ship and such, and maybe just just to tie up loose ends and kind of really, really wrap it up. But until that time,